Mr. President. Mr. President, ever since Republicans succeeded in overturning Roe v. Wade and ripping abortion rights away from millions of women, they've been trying to hide how extreme their positions on abortion are and how devastating the fallout has been for families. You know, even as each new day brings a new horror driven by Republican extremists, like the dystopian bill put forward in South Carolina, which proposed the death penalty for women who get an abortion. And one of my colleagues even recently said that as president, he would, quote, literally sign the most conservative pro-life legislation. And let's not forget the terrifying lawsuit in Texas that is hanging over the entire country, where Republican extremists want to overrule FDA's experts, undermine its authority to review and approve all manner of drugs, from chemotherapy to insulin, and take the abortion pill mifepristone away from patients all across the country, even in states like mine where abortion is still legal, and even though we have 20 years of data showing that drug is safe and effective. Yet when the district judge issued a dangerous ruling that would rip this drug off the shelf, 69 congressional Republicans filed a brief calling for that ruling to go into effect and deny women in every single state access to this FDA-approved medication. Now, the Supreme Court has stayed the decision for the time being, but this threat to women's ability to get this drug is as real as ever. And now, 147 congressional Republicans, many Republicans who are in leadership, Republicans with oversight authority over FDA, have filed a brief opposing our efforts to protect access to mifepristone and protect FDA authority. And this extreme lawsuit is far from the only dangerous anti-abortion policy some congressional Republicans are pushing, as is the bill that we are about to vote on today. Mr. President, it has been incredibly infuriating for women to be told by Republicans that we are overreacting, fear-mongering, even as we are being told by patients and providers about the nightmare they are now living in, about the impossible decisions they have had to make, and about the decisions, the deeply personal decisions they've not been allowed to make that Republican politicians are instead now making for them. It strains belief that Republicans actually think victims of rape or incest are not being affected by their policies, and that women whose health, whose very lives are in danger, are not facing any barriers or being denied the care they need, especially when we see news stories reported every day showing that's not the case. Stories that show women are being put in horrific, unthinkable situations, forced to travel absurd distances for care after they were raped, forced to wait and bleed and get sicker and sicker before they can get the care they desperately need. But even if Republicans are ignoring the devastation state abortion bans are causing and ignoring women who are speaking out every single day, what we are talking about today in this Senate is a bill congressional Republicans wrote themselves. And it really puts an end, once and for all, to some Republicans' empty claims that they are being moderate in any way here, that victims of rape or women with medical complications are not being hurt, because this bill, which Republicans wrote, which Republicans are coming to the floor advocating for, would cut veterans and their families off from care when their lives are in danger, and would cut them off from care after rape or incest. Make no mistake, that's what this debate is about today. That is what they are voting for. And in arguing for this bill, they are also showing they know full well how extreme state bans actually are. After all, they cannot pretend that on one hand, state abortion bans have meaningful exemptions for women with life-threatening complications, for people who have been raped, including children, while also arguing, on the other hand, that this proposal defies state laws to allow VA to provide care in those heartbreaking situations. Those arguments contradict each other. And more importantly, those claims contradict the real heartbreaking stories we are already hearing from women and doctors about how these bans are putting lives at risk. Extreme abortion bans are causing healthcare crises all across the country, along with so many personal crises for families in facing incredibly difficult situations, which is why the VA care rule that President Biden put forward is so important and why Democrats are standing so firm to keep it intact. Despite the rhetoric from my Republican colleagues, this rule that they are trying to overturn is a meaningful, modest step to protect our veterans. It simply allows the VA to provide abortion care to make sure that none of our veterans or their eligible dependents go without medical treatment when their life is in danger or are forced to stay pregnant after a rape or incest. That's it. That's what Republicans are so upset about. They're upset that this administration has taken action to make sure women who have served our country in uniform can get the basic reproductive care they need when their health is at risk or in cases of rape or incest. Now, those veterans fought to protect our rights, and now Republicans want to roll back theirs. These veterans put their life on the line for us. And now Republicans who support this resolution want to tell them that when their life is in danger, tough luck politics comes first. No one deserves that. So I urge all of my colleagues, stand with our veterans, stand with their families, and vote against this unthinkably cruel bill that seeks to force women veterans to stay pregnant even when their life is at risk, even after rape or incest. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
President.
I ask unanimous consent that Senators Tuberville and Schumer be permitted to complete their remarks prior to the roll call vote.
Is there objection? Without objection.
Mr. President.
Senator from Alabama.
Mr. President, I'm proud to have come from a military family. Our veterans are some of the best people in this country. And because of that, I'm grateful to serve on the Veterans Affairs Committee. Giving back to our veterans has been a passion my whole life. Our men and women in uniform deserve the best medical care available. I'm grateful for every healthcare provider that works for and with our veterans. The mission of the VA is taken from Abraham Lincoln's second inaugural address. Lincoln pledged our country to care for him who shall have borne the battle. That's what the VA is supposed to be about. But today, under the Biden administration, we see the VA increasingly getting distracted from that very important mission. The Biden administration increasingly has the VA involved in politics. Last year, the VA announced they would begin providing taxpayer-funded abortions. Last year. This is something the VA has never, ever done. Let me repeat that. The VA has never done abortions. In fact, the VA has been prohibited by this body from performing abortions at its facilities for more than 30 years. The 102nd Congress, 1991 and 1992, made taxpayer-funded abortions at VA facilities illegal. Let me repeat that. 30 years ago, this body made taxpayer-funded abortions illegal. It is a law. They did this with the Bipartisan Veteran Health Care Act of 1992. Last I heard, that is a federal law passed by this body, which for some reason we don't want to do anymore. We want the executive branch to be able to do it on their own. And that's wrong. We need to do our job. This today is not about abortion. It's about taxpayers paying for abortions that they don't have to pay for because of a law that was presented and passed in this chamber in 1992. The bill was introduced in the House and the Senate by who? No other than the Democrats. The Senate passed it unanimously. This includes a senator by the name of Joe Biden. Now, President Biden is breaking the law that he voted for. How do you do that? This is a direct violation of federal law. The Biden administration even wants taxpayers on the hook for abortions for veterans' dependents. That's never happened. So we're changing the law on 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue and not in here where we're supposed to do our job. It's got nothing to do with the VA's mission. And the VA won't even tell Congress if they're placing restrictions on abortion. When are they doing it? 5 months, 3 months, 2 months after the baby's born? We can't get any information out of them. They just write the laws themselves. The VA has refused to cooperate with Congress throughout this whole process. And that's what this is all about. For all we know, taxpayers funding abortion can be at any time at their choosing. This new policy also includes very limited moral protections for VA medical staff. This too is unheard of in our laws and our traditions. We've had moral protections on the books for decades. It was James Madison who said, "A man has a right to his property, and conscience is the most sacred property of all." This was the attitude of our founders. Frankly, the founders would be shocked by what's happening in this chamber today. Frankly, the Biden administration is violating the conscience of the taxpayer as we speak, but putting pressure on the taxpayer to have to defend and go after this. Taxpayers shouldn't be forced to pay for abortions, especially not when this was done without anybody taking a vote in this building, especially when Congress voted to make it illegal 30 years ago. It's illegal and it's wrong. In just a few moments, the Senate has a chance to do something about it. We are going to vote on a bipartisan basis to overturn this rule. If Democrats want taxpayer-funded abortions within the VA healthcare system, let's vote on it. That's what we're elected to do. Not lean on a president in the White House to say this is what we're going to do. That ain't the way we do it in this building. And if we're going to do it that way, let's lock the door and go home and save the taxpayer a lot of money. Again, this is not about abortion. This is about doing it the wrong way. Let's pass a bill. Let's change the law. Let's don't break the law in here. I'd like to thank the dozens of senators supporting my resolution. I'd also like to thank Senator Manchin and Senator Marshall for standing with me earlier today at a press conference to push the facts to the taxpayers and citizens of this country. It's very simple. Any senator who votes against this resolution is voting for taxpayer-funded abortion with no guardrails or protection for any medical staff or nurses. Voting no on this resolution means voting to give away even more power from Congress to the executive branch. And that's really all we need around here. Right now, the VA is spending money we have never voted to spend. Anyone who believes in the appropriation process must oppose this rule and support this resolution. Voting no would mean letting the administration spend money without the consent of the people in this room. And that's what we're elected to do. Voting no means a big stamp of approval for a blatantly illegal regulation. Voting against the resolution also means turning the VA taxpayer funded into an abortion clinic. The VA should be focused on their mission. Lord knows, we got 20 veterans a day dying of suicide. Why don't we focus on helping the veterans that have been fighting in wars, these last 20-year wars that we've been funding? Let's keep politics out of the VA. These people have had enough politics in their life. Let's stay focused on their mission to care for him who shall have borne the battle, as spoken by President Abraham Lincoln. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President,
Senator from California.
I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Baldwin.
Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, in reference to the amendment,
Senate is in a quorum call.
I ask unanimous consent the quorum be dispensed with. And may we have order, Mr. President?
Without objection, the quorum call is dispensed with.
Thank you.
Senate will be in order. Majority Leader is recognized.
Now, Mr. President, when the health and safety of our country is at risk, it's up to veterans to step up to protect us. They risk their lives for us. They're always there for us. But today, Senator Tuberville from Alabama is pushing legislation that would take away reproductive care for hundreds of thousands of veterans and their families. That's right. The hard right is telling our veterans they should be treated as second-class citizens, our women veterans. It's the kind of extreme proposal millions of Americans strongly oppose, and one which passed would gravely harm women's health. There are over 150,000 women veterans. They risk their lives for us. Now we must protect them. The more Americans reject MAGA extremism, the more MAGA Republicans seem to double down. And this bill is a perfect example. That's it. That is the Magna right in a nutshell. Eliminate women's choice at all costs, even at the cost of our national defense. Again, the MAGA right says eliminate women's choice at all costs, even at the cost of national defense. Here's the bottom line. Our veterans dedicated their lives to our freedom, so we should protect their freedom of choice, plain and simple. I yield the floor. Oh, Mr. President, before I yield the floor, I ask unanimous consent that the vote in relation to the Scott of Amendment number 81 occur following the vote on the motion to proceed to Senate J Res 10. Further, I ask the Senate vote at 11:15 tomorrow in relation to Amendment numbers 85 and 83, and the Senate vote on passage of S 870 is amended, if amended, at 1:45, with all provisions under the previous order remaining in effect.
Is there objection? Without objection.
I yield the floor. I strongly urge a no vote on this CRA, this awful CRA.